It's time for Live on Lanier. Welcome to Live on Lanier, a monthly podcast brought to you by the Lake Lanier Association. Since the sudden closure of so many Lake Lanier parks and boat ramps right before Memorial Day weekend, the Lake Lanier Association has been communicating with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and other involved and interested parties, looking out for the best interest of Lake Lanier. This month, we are interviewing Tim Rainey, the Operations Project Manager for the Corps of Engineers at Lake Lanier. Tim goes into great detail as to how the events leading up to the closures happened and what we can expect for the rest of this summer. As you will hear in this interview, budget, staffing, hiring freezes, and timing played a substantial role in all of these closures. In the 24 hours following our conversation, news came that the government hiring freeze for the Corps of Engineers for Rangers on Lanier had been lifted. If you'd like more information on how you can apply for one of those positions, you can find the link to the job posting on the YouTube video caption for this episode. Also, as sometimes happens, once the camera equipment was packed away, Tim thought of additional information in regards to staffing not included in the interview. I will do my best to cover that information at the end of the podcast. After Tim's interview, we'll hear a brief word from LLA President Todd Baxter on the important role everyone can take in regard to many core issues, so you'll want to be sure to stay tuned for that. Feel free to share this episode with your friends and neighbors who have an interest in Lake Lanier. If you'd like more information on how to join the Lake Lanier Association, scan the code on your screen or go to lakelanier.org. And now, here's our interview with Tim Rainey, the Operations Project Manager for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at Lake Lanier. Well, welcome to Live on Lanier, brought to you by the Lake Lanier Association. We're very happy to be sitting here with Mr. Tim Rainey, who's the Operations Project Manager for the Corps of Engineers at Lake Lanier. Tim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We thought we'd be talking about boating safety and a great summer coming up, and instead we've got a lot of news coming at us right before Memorial Day weekend.
Just a little.
I know these things happen, but there's a lot of questions out there as to why and how and when. So normally, we're very conversational in our interviews, and I'm really thankful for you taking the time to join us. But I've got a whole list of questions here that came from our board of directors, and I'm going to do my best to check them off down the list, and we'll see if we just can't cover what we think. Everybody's wondering, what the heck? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Great. So, we're talking about the boat ramp closures and the park closures that all hit right before Memorial Day weekend. How did that happen, and especially coming right up to Memorial Day weekend?
Yeah, so I'm assuming, I'm going to say everybody knows. You've seen operations at Lake Lanier over the past decade.
Okay.
Historically, Lake Lanier has been under-resourced. So that's just always been an issue. So this current issue did specifically, or is the result specifically of our staffing situation now. And I can go back to even last fall, actually last summer, when we received our 25 budget. Mm-hmm. We always do an analysis to see what we can do. And last fall, I said, funding-wise, we can't do everything. So I sent that down to Mobile, and we found a solution. Mobile found us a little bit more money. We put a little bit more money on our O&M services contract, and they even found money for me to hire 3 more people, 3 more Rangers. We had gone through the process and actually extended what we call, in our world, tentative job offers, and the hiring freeze hit. Mm-hmm. So we were not able to hire those 3 Rangers. And we had other vacancies that we were not able to recruit and fill. We had a retirement outside of DRP, the Deferred Resignation Program. Then we had 3 retire with the Deferred Resignation Program. So our staffing was just decimated, cut in half, more than half. I don't have the exact numbers, but we just can't continue to spread ourselves thin and try to operate all the parks we're expected to operate with half the staff that we have. So it was put on me. The directive was identify what you can serve and identify what you can't serve. And that's what we did. And we identified we could serve 16 parks, 8 parks on the south end along Buford Dam Road, We need to keep Buford Dam Road open, especially on weekends. Those parks are the busiest. The traffic lines or stacks up back onto Buford Dam Road. We just had to focus our resources on those parks on Buford Dam Road. In addition, the other 8 parks are our partner parks. We've already made a commitment to serve those parks with our ranger staffing, so we'll continue to serve those. So that's 8 parks along Buford Dam Road, 8 parks with the partners, that's 16. We have 36 total parks, so there's 20 we can't operate. And I'll take this opportunity. I know the original number was 21.
Mm-hmm.
That was my mistake. I included one park that was previously identified as a reclassification to an operational area in our 22 master plan, so I never should have said 21. I never should have turned that one in. The number we could not operate was 20. So there's where we are today. We don't have 20 closed today. There's only 9 closed today.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just kind of where we got to. Higher level negotiations with Corps of Engineers leadership and politicians and both federal and state, just the discussions that occurred outside of my office. A lot of promises, I'm calling them promises, a lot of statements were made by federal and state politicians that local law enforcement would help us if we could open more ramps, open more parks. So I was directed to open 9 additional parks, and this was before Memorial Day, so we opened them with the message from this office that we cannot provide park ranger services to those 9 parks. And the expectation was local jurisdictions would help. Those were the statements I heard from the elected leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Memorial Day comes and goes, and that local assistance didn't come to fruition. Talked to the local jurisdictions, primarily the sheriff, because it was really focused on law enforcement. They hadn't heard a word about it. You know, I just talked to Captain Dillard this morning with DNR. One of the politicians said in those higher level negotiations that DNR offered to hire short-term employees to help us open ramps. Statements made by the politicians and actually what's happening with the agencies that's supposed to do it are 2 different things. So DNR didn't hire short-term employees. Local jurisdictions didn't provide local law enforcement. So there's no services at those parks.
Let me circle back to just briefly recover the story, because there's parts of this I had no idea had taken place, although common sense says that's probably what happened. So all the way back when you got your budget for this year, you knew there was an issue. You tried to get it resolved. You thought you had it resolved. And then at the very last moment, the landscape changed with the hiring freeze. So the people you would have brought in that would have kept everything operating normally, you could no longer hire.
Correct.
And you actually had them on the table ready to sign a deal and let's go. And that's when the hiring freeze happened.
Yep.
So the whole suddenness of it happening right before Memorial Day was actually kind of a long and drawn out process.
Correct.
That is interesting. Okay, well, that answers a lot of the questions that we wanted to start off with, particularly in regards to how these things are funded and how it really works, you know, and how it's projected in advance and how you make sure you're ready when the time comes.
Right. And just, you mentioned the word funded, and I do want to just clarify.
Yeah.
You know, funding and staffing are inextricably linked. You can't have staffing without funding.
Right.
So a lot of people are saying, well, how can you have a staffing issue? Or you're saying it's a staffing issue and not a funding issue. They're linked. It's got to be both. Well, keep in mind, this is the staffing issue. And just what we've been talking about, hiring freeze. We have the money today in our appropriations at Lake Lanier to hire the people and pay them. Excuse me. So that funding is there. It's not a funding issue. We're not allowed to make those hires. That makes it the staffing issue.
Right.
So the money's available. If we just be allowed to hire, we could hire, and we'd be rocking and rolling.
I gotcha. That actually answers a lot. And the whole funding and the resources designated to the project hasn't just been an issue with what's going on with the parks right now. It's a global issue that affects just about every area under your operation when it comes to recreation.
A nationwide problem, yes.
Yeah. So for the parks that are open now, should we expect any changes for the rest of the summer?
This is what I'm calling the good news, and it may not be good news for you or the public. So in the past, even when we had our staffing and operating all the parks, it's still slim. So we're stretched very thin, especially in these parks that get full on weekends.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have a dedicated ranger at certain parks doing nothing but traffic control on Saturdays and Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
So that does not allow rangers, that takes all our rangers. And sometimes we don't have enough rangers even to do traffic control at all the parks that need it.
Right.
But that takes away from those rangers actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, park ranger services, park ranger duties in the parks,
Mm-hmm.
engaging with visitors, implementing what we call our visitor assistance program, doing vessel safety checks at ramps. And yes, enforcement of rules and regulations is a safety issue. We'd rather be in the park resolving conflict early. Example, you're at a picnic table and the picnic table next to you is drinking, carrying on, disorderly. Well, if we're in the parks, we can address that.
Mm-hmm.
If we're out directing traffic, we cannot. So in the parks that we're servicing, the 8 parks along Buford Dam Road and our partner parks, expect to see our rangers in the parks. Expect to see our rangers at the boat ramps doing vessel safety checks. We would rather, and I'm sorry if we inconvenience you, if you show up to a ramp and we give you a vessel safety check and you don't have enough life jackets, we're not letting you on the water. You can run up to the store and get it. You might be upset, but we'd rather you be upset for that 30 minutes it takes you to run and get life jackets.
Yeah.
Then you get out on the water and something happened and you not have it and you don't even go home for the day. So get mad at us. That's fine.
Yeah.
We believe our job, part of our job, is to help keep the lake safer. So we will have rangers in the parks doing vessel safety checks. We will have rangers in the parks doing water and boating safety education. We will have rangers in the parks engaging with visitors, engaging with children, talking about water safety with them,
Mm-hmm.
maybe talking about the life jacket loaner stations, how important life jackets are. All those myriad of duties that park rangers think they're going to do when they come to Lake Lanier and they haven't been able to do because they've been stuck directing traffic, we're going to be doing in those open parks, the ones that we serve. Those 9 and now 11, because we were directed to open 2 more parks after Memorial Day, which was Old Federal Day use in Little Hall. Those are open, but there are no ranger services. When we were directed to open parks, we told them we will not have ranger services in them, and there's not going to be ranger services. I hate saying that because now the disorderlies know where to go, but they're open because of whatever reasons, political or not, we still don't have the staff to serve them. So a lot of people said, again, comments I hear, well, you said 21 were closed, and then you backed it down to 11, and then now it's down to 9. You said it was a staffing issue. Certainly you didn't get people hired overnight or over the weekend, so what changed? Well, what changed is we were directed to open them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't answer that question. That came from politicians or whoever above. But they're open, they just don't have our services.
When you talk about park ranger services, unfortunately, we had received stories even before Memorial Day got here, some of those unserviced parks where the picnic tables were actually used to make a bonfire.
Yeah.
You know, you just...
So, and let me clarify services. When I'm talking about park ranger services, that's a park ranger body.
Mm-hmm.
We still have our operations and maintenance contract funded.
Mm-hmm.
That means they're going to go in there and cut the grass. They're going to go in there and remove the trash. They're going to go in there and clean the bathroom. So that all is fine. They will receive those services, but there will not be park rangers in there to resolve conflict, to keep single cars parking in boat trailer spots. We won't be there. We won't be there to keep them from building a fire on a picnic table. We're just not going to be there. We don't have the staff.
Is there any progress being made in what you mentioned earlier with local sheriff's departments or police departments? There's 5 different counties on the lake. There's a lot of jurisdictions that could get involved. Somebody saying they're going to and it actually happening are obviously 2 different things. Right. Are we making progress in closing that gap?
We are. We're still, and the closures are occurring, and just to be clear, in Forsyth County and Hall County. Both Forsyth County and Hall County are interested in taking over operations of the parks. We are actively engaged with them. Just before I came over here and sat down, I saw a voicemail from Forsyth County. When we get done, I'm going to go call him back. Internally, I have a meeting with our real estate division Monday to hopefully answer some questions on how we can expedite this or move it along a little bit faster. There's 3 different ways we could attempt to do this. One is through our partnership authority, what we currently have with our campgrounds. Now, I don't want to get too complex into that because there's that authority was not necessarily built for our situation now, because that authority requires us to, as part of that agreement, requires us to still provide park ranger patrols. And that's what we can't do.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm trying to see if we can use that authority for us to do all the maintenance and cleaning and mowing, and the local jurisdictions do the patrols.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still some unanswered questions there. It's not looking too favorable. That would be the quickest thing we could do. We're still trying to work it out. The next piece that would be quickest would be a license. That may take a few months. That would be an actual document through our real estate division.
Mm-hmm.
Then we can get to a lease. Counties, specifically Forsyth County, and maybe Hall, I don't want to speak for them. Forsyth does want a longer term lease, but that could take up to a year to get a lease done. There's just a lot of requirements and documents to be done for that to occur. So hopefully we can enter into one of these, either partnership or license, kind of as a bridge or an interim,
Mm-hmm.
while we work on getting a lease done.
Mm-hmm.
And those are some of the questions we're going to talk about internally with our real estate division this coming Monday.
Gotcha. I was at a Hall County Commission meeting, and they'd given an award for one of the parks that they had taken over operations from the court. It's been a huge success. Is that something that you see broadcasting wider and wider, and further down the road there's liable to be more parks and counties that are, or parks that are operated by counties or the state or other entities?
So our current partnerships, and I don't want to take away any credit from Hall County and Forsyth County and Dawson County.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the three jurisdictions we have our partners with. I do want to keep in mind or remind everybody that it's still cooperatively managed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the counties provide services, but the Corps of Engineers provide services as well. So it's not just a full takeover and operation by the county. It's
Okay.
a partnership type effort.
Sure.
When that authority came out a while back, I saw that as the future. It's the only way we're going to survive with parks. It's going to be either that or the licenses or leases. Because we as the federal government, the Corps of Engineers, we'll be funded for recreation, but you've seen it. Everything in the country, just nationally, not just reduce the size of the government, but there's just not money. So with inflation and costs going up and our budget staying flat, and that's another thing on the funding issue, even over history, it's not that our budgets have been reduced, they've just been flat and have not been able to keep up with inflation. So something will have to change. We'll have to divest, when I say divest, license or lease, or partner with local jurisdictions or state to continue to provide recreational opportunities.
Are all 5 counties on the lake in those conversations, or is there a focused area, or how is that playing out?
Lumpkin County currently operates and leases with the 2 parks in Lumpkin County.
Mm-hmm.
Dawson County currently either has under lease or partnered all the parks in Dawson County. Gwinnett County has no leases, or we don't have partnerships with them. There are just a few parks down here: Beaufort Dam Park, Lower Overlook, Lower Pool, East, and Lanier Park and East Bank Park. They provide services. They help us with their Gwinnett County Police Department. We've not had any issues, and those are in the areas we're going to serve. So we're okay there. We're good with those parks at the moment. They even provide us services outside of any contract. They're starting to get in the parks more. I think they see it as a benefit to their county, even though it's up in the top little corner of Gwinnett County. They're paying a lot of attention to enforcement and compliance in those parks.
Terrific. And everybody would like to see them fast-tracked.
Yeah.
But I've been in license and lease negotiations in the business professional world, and every time you have to do it with a government entity, you just may as well know it's going to take longer than you think it should, because that's how fast those wheels grind. But they're incredibly technical documents, and they cover every aspect of everything going on. For example, you made the reference to still mowing the grass and taking care of some of the other things while the counties are doing different parts, and every agreement has its own personality. So what would your mind say a fast track is in a situation like this?
If we could use the partnership authority and get it signed off on by our headquarters staff and negotiate the arrangements of the duties with the counties, we could have that done in 30 days.
Wow, that is fast track.
It's because it stays, it stays more local than the other documents, than the lease and license document. So the key on that one is we got to make sure our headquarters, it's the authority we can use. There's some question right now in this current situation. But if that said okay, then we as the Corps, or me as the project manager, sit down at the table just like this with the counties and say, here's what we want you to do. They say, here's what we can do. And we just hash it out. We just negotiate it and come up with a document. And I used to be able to sign it, but I'd have to send it to our headquarters to get approved. But that's pretty quick. So that could be that's the quickest way.
Okay.
We just have to figure out if it's the authority we can use.
Gotcha. Very cool. Interestingly enough, and this is off base of what's on the paper here, but I want to throw it in anyway. You work out of the Mobile district.
I work out of this office.
You work out of this office.
But I'm in the Mobile district.
In the Mobile district. People are always looking at Allatoona and looking at Hartwell and saying, well, why not this? Why is it different there than different than here? Actually, to correct me if I'm wrong here, but those three lakes all work out of a separate district office?
Allatoona is still in Mobile district.
Okay.
But Hartwell is in Savannah district.
Savannah, okay. Okay, so, but each lake has its own operation manual, its own operation.
Well, Operations Project Manager, there are different missions. These three lakes are pretty much the same with all the missions, so we are similar. I'm not going to go down the shoreline plan route, but each project will have its own shoreline plan. That's a whole different,
we're going to bump into that at the end of the conversation today.
But tying it into these closures now, even nationwide, the hiring freeze and the deferred resignation program just hit each project individually different. So, for example, we already had vacancies before the hiring freeze. We already had funding for to fill additional ranger spots that before the hiring freeze that we talked about that we couldn't because the hiring freeze hit. Then we had an outside DRP retirement, and then we had more DRP retirements.
By DRP, you're
Deferred Resignation Program.
Okay.
So we got hit hard with vacancies. Hartwell either didn't get impacted, nobody took the DRP, they didn't have vacancies, or they had one or two. And we always have one or two vacancies so we can survive and live. So they were very little impacted. Allatoona, I think, had 3 staff that impacted their operations. So maybe they only closed, and I can't even remember, 2 or 3 parks. We had the majority of the vacancies in at Lake Lanier in the recreation program in the whole district. So that's why it hit Lanier so hard, or harder than other projects.
That's interesting. Okay, well, and again, we're going back to resources. Again, kind of off base here. We talked about this before, and fill me in on how this works. But you would think that when people pay their dock fees, it goes into your bank account somewhere, and then you can use it to spend right here on Lake Lanier. But it doesn't actually work that way, does it?
No. So we're talking dock fees or recreation fees?
The whole thing.
Okay.
How funding works.
How
funding works with the Corps of Engineers. How's that?
Oh my goodness, that's a whole nother.
That's a whole show.
I'll go
the brief
over
version.
some highlights.
Okay.
So recreation fees, the day use fee you pay, the annual pass you buy, all goes to the U.S. Treasury. The camping fees you pay. Now I've got some caveats to this. So part of the reason and part of the authority for why we partnered with the local jurisdictions for the campgrounds, because that authority allowed, if we partnered and had that relationship, and the counties manned the gates, staffed the gatehouse, did all the reservations, did all that stuff, and they collected the fees, they can retain those fees to offset their costs. They can retain those fees, and even if there was excess collections of those fees over and above their costs, they could keep them, but they'd have to be reinvested into that park.
Sure. It sounds like a square deal.
That's a difference between before that authority, 100% of all our recreation fees went to the Treasury. We got that authority, so now Hall County collects the fees at Bowling Mill, Duckett Mill, and Old Federal campgrounds. They collect them. They use those fees to offset their costs, and any extra they'll put back into the park. So maybe they need some new picnic tables at Old Federal. So maybe they'll use that. We sit down together and they say, here's what we need. We figure out where those fees should spend. And it's not that they're managing 3 of them. We don't total up the total excess for those 3 and pick one park to put it in. The excess fees from Old Federal have to go into Old Federal. The excess fees from Bowling Mill have to go into Bowling Mill. The excess fees from Duckett Mill have to go into Duckett Mill. So that got us keeping fees here, that authority.
Mm-hmm.
Separately, bigger picture, the Corps of Engineers operates under what Congress identifies, and it's just a thing, legislation, Water Resources Development Act, WRDA, WRDA for short. The last WRDA that was passed was 2024. It's supposed to be passed every 2 years. I think typically is. But in that WRDA 2024, the authority from Congress is given to the Corps of Engineers to retain, I believe, up to 80% of those recreation user fees. That has not been implemented yet, but it's coming to where the Corps can retain at least 80%, I think, or up to 80%. There's some numbers in there I don't have exact, but we will start to be able to keep those recreation user fees, and they will not go to the Treasury.
Will that enhance what your current budget is, or will it be like, okay, we moved that money in, we're moving this money out, or do you know?
That part's yet to be seen. Of
Yeah.
course, I hope that, and usually, well, I won't speak for how the law works. We hope that we would be able to keep those fees on top of our historical appropriations.
Mm-hmm.
But
that would make sense. That would be great.
That's what gets into what you were just saying. It may end up that it's, the powers that be, OMB, whoever, OMB, Office of Management Budget.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, Lake Lanier, if you're collecting $1 million in rec fees, then we can reduce what we give you by $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happens, then we're no better off.
Right.
I can't speak to if that's going to happen or not.
We call that the shell game where I come from. Game. Absolutely. So on the hiring freeze, is there any indication how long that's going to be in place? Is there any chance it might be lifted soon enough to impact this season?
Oh. I'll still tell you what I heard, but let's just say it's lifted today.
Okay.
Let's just say, hypothetically.
It's lifted today.
Tim, you can go hire people.
I got you.
All right. We've got our packages ready. We send our packages in, so they go out on USA Jobs. Typically be advertised for a couple of weeks on USA Jobs. I won't go through all the steps. Lifted today.
Legally, technically, there's a whole bunch of steps it has to go through.
Hypothetically lifted today. Best case scenario, we got somebody here in 3 months maybe.
Gotcha.
And then I'm not going to have somebody, Kirby, you're hired.
Mm-hmm.
You walk in the door, all right, go up to Burton Mill and direct traffic. No, we got to train you first.
Give me a whistle. Sure, I got
this. We got to train you first.
Yeah.
We got to get you uniforms. We got to get you set up. If hypothetically lifted today, maybe they'd be good for next recreation season.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want anybody to think if the news comes out, the hiring fees is lifted, people can hire, that means parks are going to open the next day.
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
Right. Even in the private sector, it wouldn't happen that fast.
So part of that, I'm trying to get into managing expectations.
Sure. So one of the things we talk a lot about with the Lake Lanier Association is how can we help? What is it we need to do? Who do we need to be in touch with? The Lake Lanier Association is the strongest citizen advocate on the lake that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. We represent a lot of homeowners. We represent a lot of boat owners and recreation users. What is our message to the Lake Lanier Association that we need to do to help you get more funding so we can get these things rolling?
Well, I'm even going to stay away from the words more funding.
Okay.
I'll if I can put some words in your mouth for
Please
a second.
do. Yeah, do what we need to do.
What can the Lake Lanier Association do to help the Corps of Engineers? So, and some folks out there want to say help the public. So, splitting hairs. Anyway, biggest thing, my recommendation is there is the public, the public, have to pay attention have to speak out. And if you can speak out your voice, yes, the Lake Lanier Association is a powerful voice. But let's just look at the example of these closures. So as we've said, we initially came out with 20, 21, but it should have been 20. What happened? Phones started ringing off the walls in the politician's office. The politicians call the core leadership. The core leadership and the politicians have discussions and negotiations. Get this fixed. Well, some of it got fixed. Some parks were directed to be reopened, so they were open. There's still no staffing to provide those services, but look what it changed.
Mm-hmm.
That public outcry got it from 20 to today, 9 parks are closed. So there's just an example of that's what drives the change. The public will drive the change. Internal to the core, me as manager of Lake Lanier, going up to Mobile District, to South Atlantic Division, to headquarters, yeah, they'll listen to me. But unless the public speaks out as to what they want, there won't be a whole lot of change.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not trying to create a frenzy here, but I've had meetings with stakeholders here, Lake Lanier Convention and Visitors Bureau, Stacy Dixon, and Friends of Lake Lanier, and the Lake Lanier Association. And I've said just that. I, as a federal employee, excuse me, cannot go to Congress and lobby. I'm prohibited. So I can engage you as the Lake Lanier Association and say, what do you want to see at Lake Lanier? You can tell me, but if I can't provide it, I can't provide it.
Right.
If you really want it, then you need to start making phone calls and writing letters. And when I say you, yes, you as the Lake Lanier Association, but encourage your members to do the same.
Right.
Because yes, the Lake Lanier Association, I don't quite know how this works. Lake Lanier Association can call a congressman's office and say, this is Lake Lanier Association. We represent 5,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we want. Okay, well, it's still one phone call. But if 4,000 members call the congressman and say, this is what we want, well, that's different.
Mm-hmm.
So interpret that how you want.
Gotcha.
And I'll leave it at that.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with as we move into summer?
Oh, way too many. I'll always end with, if you do come to the lake this summer, which I'm sure you do, just keep aware, safety always, wear your life jackets, but also keep in mind our rangers out there. That's another thing I'll mention, though. A lot of the public and our talking points were closing parks was due to safety. Well, a lot of people give me feedback on, well, how are you keeping me safe? I just launch my boat at 6 in the morning. I'm on the lake for a few hours fishing, and I never see a ranger. Well, to put that to that person, we may not see you out there. You may not see a ranger. Maybe we don't do anything to keep you safe. If you're an experienced fisherman and you're comfortable and you're good, great, fantastic. But there's other visitors in that park that we want to keep safe. Or maybe we did a vessel safety check and didn't let a boat on the water for whatever reason that didn't go out on the lake and crash into you later. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I put in there is, let's not forget, yes, we said safety, and yes, we said public safety. We are concerned with public safety. That is our job. But let's not forget our rangers. When we've got 6 or 7 rangers spread across 10 or 12 parks that are over capacity, and one ranger's at one park and being accosted and verbally abused because people are angry because the park's full because they can't get in, we can't do it anymore. Our rangers have suffered too much verbal abuse and verbal threats, and we're just not going to do it. We're retreating back into our identified service area. We're not going to have one ranger directing traffic at one park. That's one ranger against I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of people. And not that everybody's bad, but it's been some unsafe situations over the years. And not only for public safety, but also for our employees' safety. Mm-hmm. We have closed some of these parks and provided our rangers a safer place to work.
Okay, very good. Well, once again, thank you for joining us. We'll talk again soon, and let's all work together to make it a safe, great summer on Lake Lanier. And now, here's a brief message from our president, Todd Baxter.
Thanks, Kirby. What a great session you had with Tim Rainey from the Corps. It's always interesting to get his perspective, and I appreciate our behind-the-scenes access to perspective like this. You know, one of the things that Tim mentioned was a call out to each of you to reach out to your congressman and express an interest in getting more funding for him and for the Corps for Lake Lanier. And I would like to remind you that's not the only way your voice can be heard with your congressman or other constituents. Our shoreline management survey, the first one we've ever done, is available to you as members now, and is really going to be the only collectively harnessed voice of people who live on and enjoy this beautiful lake. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't participated already, to please do so. Please follow the link. You can go to our website, lakelanier.org, and take the survey. And we plan to publish the results of that survey later this summer in September, and then also use that information to help inform decisions that are made at the federal and state level in regard to helping us protect and keep Lake Lanier clean, full, and safe. So thank you for your participation.
As promised, here is a summary of the additional staffing challenges mentioned in the opening that hit the Lake Lanier Project Management Office prior to Memorial Day weekend. Tim briefly referred to the Deferred Resignation Program. This program enabled Corps employees to resign or retire from their position with the Corps, stop working as soon as a date was determined, and collect a paycheck until September. The date determined was out of the control of this office. Nearly every project office, including Lake Lanier's, had employees take advantage of this program that are no longer actively working. Tim also lost a ranger to regular retirement. This can be done through the U.S. Army Benefits Center website. This allows U.S. Army employees, including Corps of Engineer employees, to go to a website, calculate their retirement, and retire via the website with no notification to the local managers. They literally found out on their last day of work that they are losing that employee to retirement. According to Tim, the Lake Lanier office has lost employees to both of these programs who until after this interview could not be replaced as a part of the government hiring freeze. So there you go. That's this month's episode of Live on Lanier. If you'd like to hear more information on the Shoreline Management Plan survey that Todd addressed, you can go to our YouTube channel and check out last month's Live on Lanier. All previous episodes and even more lake-related videos are also available on the Lake Lanier Association YouTube channel. Please feel free to share this podcast with your lake neighbors and friends. We'd love to have your support as a member of the LLA. For more information on how to join and our various programs, just go to lakelanier.org. That's lakelanier.org. Be sure to join us next month for Live on Lanier.